Aloha! Ann Moses, editor of Tiger Beat here. I so wanted to be there with you, but instead of being in Australia at your convention, I am in Hawaii, on the island of Hawaii, celebrating my 40th anniversary with my current videographer and hubby, and we've had a wonderful trip. I'm so delighted to be asked to participate. It's very inspiring to me that Monkee fans just keep going strong, supporting the monkeys, enjoying everything the monkeys have to offer, and it's my honor to be here with you today. So one of the questions that was on the list was, how old were you when you met the monkeys? Were you a fan before you were a colleague? And pretty much, I had been working for 9 months at Tiger Beat, and by that time I had had my 19th birthday in February, so I was just a 19-year-old that was looking forward to this new adventure. On the last train to Clarksville, the day before their show aired, the only monkey that I met that day was Mickey. And it was pretty exciting. I was sitting and talking with Bobby Hart, and then Mickey made his way through the car of journalists, and actually he asked me for my phone number and said he wanted to ask me out on a date. But Mickey was like that, and the call never came, and that's just fine, because he found his true love later on. So my first interactions with them really took place about 2 weeks later, when I made my first trip out to the Screen Gym set. So Tiger Beat offices were on Highland Avenue, and just about 3 miles away was the entrance to Screen Gym Studios. So I pulled up to the guard gate, told them my name, and the next thing I knew, he was showing me where to park, and I was going up to the stage door. And this would be the first sound stage I would ever go on. So it was a day full of butterflies. So when I knew enough that you didn't open a door when the red light was flashing. So once that red light went out, and there's usually a buzzer involved also, then I went on the set for the very first time. I opened the big heavy door. They're, I don't know, at least 10 feet tall, and they're very wide. And I opened the big door, and then, even though I had not yet met Davy spotted me, and he immediately came over and introduced himself and said, "Let me show you around." I was agog. It was so exciting. And Davy led me over to a spot on the set where there were a couple of the monkeys' director's chairs with their names on them, and he asked me to sit down, and he gave me kind of a visual tour of what was going on the set. And then one by one, as various monkeys would finish their scene, or they were waiting for lighting, one by one Davy introduced me to the rest of them. And they were cordial, they were acting like their goofy selves. I mean, even in their downtime, when they were on set, they acted like their monkey characters, and always cracking jokes, always making funnies. They were just very comfortable to be around. And my butterflies just turned into a pleasant excitement, because they were very close to me in age, and we just seemed like new friends that you click with immediately. So that was the first introduction. After that first time on the set, I would typically go out either to the Columbia Ranch where they filmed outdoor scenes, or I would go out to the set and there would be different episodes being filmed. And always I was gifted with being there and being able to witness their crazy antics and a tremendous amount of ad-libbing, which just made the show better than ever. Another question you had for me was, how much journalism experience did I have when I went to work for Tiger Beat? It actually began in junior high school. I was hired as a correspondent for my junior high school, which is 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in California. And I wrote about activities that were going on at my junior high. Each Friday, the paper would have a student page, and so I would write about athletic accomplishments, or if somebody was acting in a play, and I would do human interest stories about my fellow students. And I learned to write very long stories, as long as I could, because I was paid 15 cents an inch, and that was big money to me. So after that experience, once I got into high school, I worked on the yearbook, and then in my senior year, I was the yearbook editor. So that was great experience, and I, of course, enjoyed the whole process. Then when I went to community college, I went to it was called Fullerton Junior College. And in my second year, I worked on the newspaper the first year, and in my second year, I was co-editor of the college newspaper. So I would write editorials, I would do human interest stories, and of course it was my volunteer ushering at Melodyland Theater, which was a theater in the Round, across the street from Disneyland where I lived. And one night I went to work where I was a volunteer usher, and lo and behold, the Dave Clark Five were appearing, and I just said, I've got to interview them. That led to more interviews, more writing, just as a freelancer. And it was sometime in the fall of 65 that one of my friends said to me, I'd kind of like to write for Tiger Beat and get paid for doing this. And that gave me the idea that I would like to work for Tiger Beat and get paid for doing this. It really hadn't occurred to me at that point in time. And Tiger Beat's first issue was September of 65, so it was a very new publication, and the first teenage magazine that was based in Hollywood. Good morning from Kaialuhu Bay on Kona in the Big Island of Hawaii. We're on to our next set of questions, and the question this morning is, what was my first impression of each of the guys? Did those impressions remain or change? And did they change once I really got to know them? So early impressions, I always felt like Mickey liked being on stage and liked being the class clown, so to speak. He loved making jokes, improvising jokes all the time, and I feel like he's still that way to this day. Then there was Davy. Davy was always so sweet to me from moment one. Kind of took me under his wing, even though he was, maybe a year older than me, but he could see that I was more of a newbie than he was, having been on Broadway. And he just kind of looked out for me in a very brotherly type of way, and always just willing to help, willing to do anything I asked, whether I needed him to autograph a dozen different pieces of paper, which we would then put over our color pinups. He was ready, willing, and able, and that was so helpful. Then there was Peter. Peter was just like a hippie that had found a job. He still maintained his chill attitude. his Zen way of looking at things, even though he was popping up and down and acting like the silly kind of, you know, not the stupid monkey, but the disoriented monkey, the role he played on the show. In person, he was highly intelligent, highly sensitive, and just a genuine person. You got to see how Peter was on the inside just by sitting across from him and having a conversation. He was a lovely, lovely person. And then there's Michael Nesmith. Now, in my book, which is called Meow, My Groovy Life with Tiger Beats Teen Idols, thank you, available on Amazon.com, I described Mike as the resident curmudgeon. And that's to say he always had his kind of stoic personality, his sarcastic type of humor, and at times he could be a total pain in the ass. To me, anyway. Be that as it may, I don't think it would have been the Monkees had it not been this combination of four young men. They were remarkable in their own way, and together they were a real powerhouse. Okay, part two of the same question. How did I feel about them as time went on and I got to know them? Did they change, stay the same? I would say Davey was a constant. He was the consummate professional from the moment I met him until the last time I saw him, which were the days that they were taping Head, and probably a few visits to his home once the news was out that he had married Linda and had a beautiful baby girl. He was very gracious to have us over to his house so we could do photo ships with, photo sessions with Linda and Tanya and Davey. And the pictures were beautiful, and seeing them together as a family was really, really wonderful. Then Peter, it was interesting with Peter. He was constantly trying to get me to try LSD. We would be just having a conversation. He'd be answering questions for whatever story I was working on for Tiger Beat. And he was very giving and generous in that way. But then he would take a moment and he'd say, "Why don't you come and try LSD with me?" And I always said, "No, I'm too chicken." And he would say, "Well, I'll guide you through your trip and you don't have to worry. I promise you'll have a good trip." Well, I was still too chicken. And to say how he had changed over the years, when I had my first reunion with Peter, excuse me, it's a little warm out here. My first reunion with Peter was in 2013 when they came to a town near where I was living in Arizona. And greeting me, it was as if zero time had passed. It was the most remarkable feeling to just have that closeness after almost 50 years. So that was really wonderful. But in our conversation in the green room before the show, I said, "Peter, do you remember how you used to try and get me to try LSD and I never would?" And he said to me, "Annie, you didn't miss a thing." And that was so Peter, because he had struggled with alcoholism and drugs, and he had broken free and was sober and enjoying his life. And so to hear those words of wisdom after all that time was really remarkable. Okay, then there's Mickey. Now, Mickey, I did not see from the time of when they were making Head to my reunion in 2013. And I did see him after the show. And to tell you the truth, when I went to say hello, I could see this totally blank expression on his face. And it was because he had no clue who I was. And who would expect him to remember me after literally 50 years' time? And so I didn't mind a bit. When I reminded him who I was, then I got a big hug, and it was like, how are you? And of course, I knew that he had been doing these performances for so long, and it was all about the show for Mickey. So that turned out well. Now, I never got to have, thus far, a reunion with Mike Nesmith, but during the filming of Head, he had been very standoffish to me throughout the couple of years at the height of their popularity. In fact, when I would say, I need an interview for this, I need that, he would say, why don't you take Phyllis out to lunch and she'll tell you. And that turned out to be, I made a wonderful friend. She was a wonderful woman. She told me just so genuinely about their life together, how they met, her role as a mom, and we did that several times over the course of the year, and it made for wonderful stories. It made a friendship for me in Hollywood, and it kept me off Michael's back, which was a good thing. Then when we were filming, they were filming Head out at the Columbia Ranch, Mike said to me, let's go to lunch. And I went, okay. And here's a guy who had been avoiding me for interviews for 2 years solid. And we went out to lunch, and he had about 3 scotches. I did not have alcoholic beverages because I had those butterflies in my stomach, because here was Michael, who had given me a hard time over and over and over again, and I really didn't know what to expect. But what turned out was, he told me, the reason I gave you a hard time is I wanted you to ask harder questions. I didn't want to answer your stupid teeny bopper questions, and I wanted to talk to you about serious subjects. Well, you know, I was a teeny bopper reporter, so I had no qualms about asking the questions that our readers wanted to know. But now I had his perspective, that he didn't want to waste his time with silly teenage magazine stuff. He wanted to talk about his music, he wanted to talk about his writing, he wanted to talk about his creative endeavors. And so I got where he was coming from. So, will I have a reunion with Michael? I hope so, because we came a long way in a very short period of time, and I would like to say hi. Okay, next question. How much say did I have over the slant of stories in Tiger Beat? Was I given assignments? Did I get to choose them myself? And what did the Monkees have any control about what I wrote? Basically, by the time I was going out in the Monkee set, my official title at Tiger Beat was feature editor. But I was the sole purpose who was out with the teen idols, getting the interviews, going along on photo sessions, and the rest of the people were more like the editorial folks that were staying at the office. And so once we started Monkee Spectacular magazine, which my publisher had licensed through Screen Gems, we had a high volume of information that we needed every month to fill the pages of those magazines. But what we didn't do is just make stories up. Now, would we take one little nugget of an idea, a quote that they had said? Maybe Peter said, you know, the most important thing in the world is love. Would we expand that into a 3-page article? Yes, we would. But the nugget came from Peter. their articles, the Monkee Talk articles, came from my interviews that we would weave into a short column written by each monkey. The monkeys were totally not concerned with what was being written about them in the teenage magazines. They knew we were helping to fuel the monkey madness machine, and they were more than willing, with the exception of Mike, of course. And so there was never a matter of, oh, I know they're going off and smoking marijuana in between the sets. Well, why would I need to, tell our 10-year-old readers and our 12-year-old readers and our 16-year-old readers about that? We weren't the National Enquirer. We weren't trying to do exposés. We were trying to have you get to know each of them. And certainly on a, we weren't there to make moral judgments. Did Davy live with Linda for a year before they officially got married? Yes, big deal. That wasn't our place to judge. They were a loving couple. So why would we write, oh, Davy's hiding this from you? Or, finally the truth is told. They were secretly married. We just didn't frame it that way. We knew that these were fans that we were writing for. And, if you wanted dirt on them, I guess you just had to go somewhere else. So not only were the monkeys happy with what we wrote, but it was so fun to get real information, real answers to questions, and then share them with all the readers of Tiger Beat. Signing off from Kayaluhu Bay in Kona, Hawaii. And I'm sorry I couldn't do the Peter wetsuit move where I've got a tuxedo on underneath, but this is as close as I could get with a wetsuit that zips up the back.
You'll always be my friend, baby. We can make it to the end.
Aloha, coming to you with the next set of questions from Kohala on Hawaii. And Kohala is the town that's on the northwest end of the island. And on our drive here, we looked across to Maui. It was a gorgeous, clear day. And we've been up in the canopy ziplining. So I'm feeling very inspired to answer your questions. So the question today is, can I tell you something about each of the monkeys that you didn't know before? And that's a tough one. Well, I can tell you experiences I had with them. There was a time after Peter had left the monkeys and he had formed his group Release, and I was doing a story on his new house in the San Fernando Valley, and Peter opened the door and he was naked. And people have asked me, well, was that kind of a Me Too situation? And it was like, no. Peter was a free soul. His house, as he said to me when he invited me in, is clothing optional. He gave me that opportunity and I said, I'm good, thanks. And then we proceeded to just go through the rooms of his house, out to the swimming pool. Various people were in various forms of dress, but it just lends itself to the whole personality of Peter. So I was neither offended nor shocked. It was just another day in Hollywood. Let's see. With Michael Nesmith, I can't think of any instances except the time I mentioned that he took me to lunch and just talked to me one-on-one as a person and kind of gave me an idea why he had made it so challenging for me to work with him. And then Mickey, I didn't have a lot of personal moments with Mickey. So he was invariably telling jokes, laughing with people in between shots on the set. And that was just Mickey's way. And, but he was always Mr. Jovial. I mean, I never saw him when he was down or angry. And that's a good thing. And then Davy. Well, Davy was just, you know, he was such an easygoing guy and so experienced in the business. I can't remember one time when we were waiting around backstage when I was on tour with them, and I told him about how I had taken tap dance and ballet lessons when I was probably in 6th grade, and he says, well, show me what you got. So I ended up showing him part of a routine. We did a little soft shoe together, and it was the coolest thing ever. Next question, did I have a favorite Monkee? I would say that my two favorites were Davy and Peter. And I have to say both of them because both of them went out of their way to be nice to me, to be cooperative with anything I needed. They understood that I was really there to promote them, so they never acted like it was an imposition or that I was interrupting or, oh no, here she comes again. They just cooperated and were just so nice in the process. Occasionally, each of them, when I'd be talking to them, they would want to know, they would ask me questions about me. Well, what was it like to work at Disneyland? Well, what is this like? Well, did you have this experience or that experience? I mean, and that always just kind of blew me away when I received a question from one of them like that. It's like, you want to know about me? You're kidding. So it was always a very flattering thing, and just one more way that showed me just nicest guys ever. Question number whatever. Did I travel with the Monkees? Did I travel with them to Australia? And the answer to those are, I got to go to their concert in San Francisco. We rode to the concert once we flew up there. I rode in Davy's limo, and the others were in a different limo, and that was really cool, and I love my picture with Davy. And then the next time was when they played Dallas and Houston, and I was at those concerts. And the answer to Australia is no. And even to this day, I scratch my own head and say, why didn't you ask? My publisher would have said, of course you can go with them. Of course I'll pay for it. But I didn't know that yet. It was early in my career. If I had known what I know now, it would have been, I'm going on this tour, I'm going on that tour. When they film in Paris, I'm going. But no, I didn't, because I didn't know that would be available to me. Because it isn't like today where you see everybody doing whatever they want with celebrities. So I did not make it to Australia, and that's my regret. But the ones I got to be on were great. The other question that came up was, how do you feel about being forever connected to the Monkees? And I have to tell you, from the time I left Tiger Beat, I didn't think much about the Monkees or any of the groups I had worked with or any of the teen idols I had worked with. I was just getting on with my life, and it was astonishing though. I remember the day at my last job before I retired, and I went into work and said, I've lost a friend today. And the girls that I worked with in an orthodontic office said, well, who is that? And I said, do you guys guys know who the Monkees are? And I think because they were all younger, they had either seen them on MTV or they heard about them, even though they weren't as familiar like first generation fans. And I said, Davy Jones died today, and I knew him, and I can't believe he's gone. And it was only then that I was aware that they were going to be touring, that I had missed their tours in the 80s and the 90s. And I suddenly became aware, thanks to the internet, that some of my stories were on the web, that pictures of me with them were on the web. And I never would have dreamed that could ever happen. But it's been one of the nicest things that's ever happened to me, because like the Monkees were looking to be validated for the music that they created and the TV show that they created that is still being shown around the world today. It was also a validation for me that all the stories I did that went into Tiger Beat, I suddenly became aware, and I was in my 60s then, of all the men and women and boys and girls that had read Tiger Beat, that knew who I was. That was the biggest shocker of all. And I could share my connection with them because I had video pictures that the Tiger Beat photographer had made. So, never dreamed it would be possible, but I am so happy that it's come full circle. So, final question. How do you feel about the Monkees today? The music that they've been producing in the last few years and their stage performances in the 2000s. In 2013, I was fortunate enough to see their show near our home, and it was Mike and Nikki and Peter on the stage, and they were awesome together. I got to have my little reunion with Peter, and that was special. And then they started coming out with the new CDs. I think that was like a couple of years ago, and I just think the music was phenomenal. Me and Magdalena, and the one about summer, that one was amazing. So they always had the talent, and now they're directing how that talent needs to come out. And what I was so amazed with at their performance in 2013, and then I saw Nikki and Mike a couple of years later, was that I was surrounded with a minimum of 3 generations of Monkee fans. There were people at the concert that came in their walkers, but they had their Monkee t-shirts on. There were young people that were probably second generation, and by young people I mean maybe they're in their 30s or 40s. So they're the ones who saw them on MTV. And here they come into the concert in their Monkee Superman costumes, and then many of the people in the audience had their children with them. And I'm telling you, when they started singing, when they did a tribute to Davy and they did Daydream Believer, every one of us in the audience was on our feet. We were singing, from old to young, all singing along. And I think that's the biggest testament to where their talent could take them, that they would have that kind of fans. And I was a fan all over again. And just 3 cheers for the Monkees and 3 cheers for their devoted fans that have stuck with them through thick and thin, and they've been mightily rewarded with all the new material.